Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dean Godenzi, School of Social Work. I hope that when you look back at your years at Boston College, that this event will be one that you will forever remember. We have the privilege today to be in the presence of one of the pioneers of the civil rights movement, Claudette Colvin. 1955. That seems like a long time ago. Probably very far away from most of you. I thought about if I would be born like in around 1990s or so, how far that would be for me and how does it must feel. So I thought about 35 years before you were born, in my time, that would end up me in World War I. Just the perspective, you know, that's sort of where I would think about how far that is away. And some of you may think World War I and the civil rights movement are very different periods and events. And you're right, they are. One lasted just 4 years. The other has been going on since the birth of our nation, almost 250 years ago. One was a war between nations. The other is a war based on race. The former resulted in 16 million casualties. The latter, we don't know the exact number, but it is growing. I'm sure you know W.E.B.'s Du Bois' famous quote, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line." And now you think, you know, it's the 21st century, so we should be living in a post-racial society. But you want to think twice about that. If you think about symptoms of the ongoing dominance of the color of our skin over the content of our character, to paraphrase Dr. King, we can look at massive disparities and disproportionalities related to health, incarceration, income, education, or police brutality. Don't know how many of you saw on YouTube Tuesday's video of white soccer fans in Paris pushing a black man out of a Paris subway and chanting, "We are racists and we like it." So while the civil rights movement led to crucial legislative achievements, such as the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and theoretically should have ended racial segregation and discrimination against Black Americans, we are still far away from reaching that goal. Nevertheless, we made significant progress, and it is due to pioneers such as Ms. Claudette Colvin. So here we are to learn from her experience, courage, civil and nonviolent disobedience, and character. Now, at the beginning of the academic year, if you would have asked me, do I know Ms. Colvin? My answer would have been no. But it just so happens that sometimes students drop by my office, not to complain, not to ask for money, but just to introduce themselves. And so one day, I think it was in September, Jennifer Colvin knocked at my door and introduced herself. Please, Jennifer, come forward. And she was talking about her. She said, "I want to introduce myself." And I was, you know, impressed that someone found the way in my little corner office. And she told me the story of her grandmother. And I was so impressed with that story that Jennifer and I have been talking about how can we make this an event during Black History Month so that you and all, me including, can learn from this impressive and wonderful life. So I asked Jennifer to say a few words to you as well.
All right. Hi, guys. I did not write anything down. I did not practice anything because I really don't know what I'm going to say. But I guess I just want to say thank you to BC, to Godinsky, to Susan, to Ruth, to everybody that took the time to make this event possible. I'm also grateful to the friends that I have that have been listening to everything and have really been by my side. And I'm like shaking up here because I'm like super nervous. It's like all these people. And I'm just like really, I guess, happy that I am in the School of Social Work where I feel so comfortable and open enough to walk up to my dean and just tell him something so personal that I've always, held so deeply inside and been so ashamed to talk about. And that's basically it. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope you all learned something. If you see me in the hallways or if I'm in your class, I guess you can feel free to ask me questions afterwards. And I hope you enjoy this. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a delight having you here, and many of your co-students, of course. At this point, I'd like to ask Dr. Ruth McCroy, who has been the chair of our Diversity and Justice Committee, to introduce both our speaker, Claudette Colvin, and we have the privilege as well to have her daughter, Cheryl Colvin, with us. So we have 3 generations of Colvins, and Ruth and I had dinner with them last night. I could tell you stories about that dinner. We're not going to go there. But it's a pleasure to have Ruth. It's a privilege to have Ruth, of course, with us. We also have other pioneers like Elaine Pinder, who's right sitting in the front row, and really making a huge impact on our school and how we have moved forward. Paul Klein is here, the former chair of the Diversity and Justice Committee. It's a great community to be part of. So Ruth, please.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all of you for being here today. This is such a special opportunity to learn about and learn from a true pioneer. Before we begin, though, I just want to mention several other things that are happening today. For one thing, in the back of the room, you'll find an art exhibit, some very special pieces from one of your classmates, Frank Garcia Ornelas. His work is being featured in the O'Neill Library. And if you'll take the opportunity when you have a chance to go back to the right side and take a look at some of his work, which is so fitting and in keeping with our theme for today. As the dean just mentioned, we've been hearing a lot about events occurring recently, the shootings of unarmed black men in Ferguson, Missouri, New York, many other places. Many of these events have really influenced us in a lot of ways to start talking about race, what's happening today. A lot of times we think everything is all set, but it's not. Much is still yet to be done. When we think about race and oppression, when we think about social justice in the United States, but most importantly, we need to know the history. How did we get to the point we are today? What do you recall in your past? What have you learned in your classes about race relations, historically, as well as in contemporary times? As the dean mentioned, we are honored today to have with us Claudette Colvin. We're also honored that her granddaughter made this possible. We're very pleased that she's one of our MSW students. We also have with us in this 3-generation process Claudette's mother, daughter, Cheryl, daughter-in-law, Cheryl. Jennifer's mother, who is currently doing something so special. She's involved in planning the 50th anniversary Jubilee celebration of Bloody Sunday. Many of you may remember that. The Selma to Montgomery March back in 1965. We're now at the 50th anniversary of that. We're very happy that Cheryl is here, and she will share with you some of the activities planned and associated with this very, very important event. But reflect just for a minute on what you know about the civil rights movement. A lot of times you think about Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. You think about special events that occurred, things like the Montgomery Bus boycott that began back in '55. This was a time period in which, although we now refer to blacks as African Americans, there was a time period in which we were referred to as Negroes. It was a time period in which back in the 50s, 60s, in that period, blacks were typically entering a bus, paying at the front of the bus, but sent to the back of the bus to sit. And if they were not able, if there were others who come in needing seating, particularly whites wanting to sit, guess what? Blacks had to move, stand, give their seats away. When we think about this and we think about the stories and those who have been honored in relation to this, and the fact that a lot of times those that you've heard most about have been men. You've been hearing a lot about those who were in their 30s or 40s at the time period in which this occurred. But there were others, one of which we have here today, who was much younger at this stage when she became active in the movement. Claudette Colvin, a civil rights pioneer, is unique and very special. She was only 15 when she protested the segregation of buses in Alabama. Now her story is the subject of a book. It's entitled Claudette Colvin, Twice Toward Justice, written by Philip Hose. He stated, "I couldn't get over that there was a teenager 9 months before Rosa Parks in the same city, in the same bus system, who experienced very tough consequences. She was hauled off the bus, handcuffed, jailed, and nobody really knew about it." Claudette Colvin is also very important because she challenged the law in court. She was one of the 4 women plaintiffs in the Browder versus Gale case, which back in 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court successfully overturned bus segregation laws in Montgomery and in Alabama. As Martin Luther King said, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed." Today, we hear from one of those persons who demanded this, who fought segregation. She's now retired and living in the Bronx. She remembers taking the bus home from high school that day back in 1955 as clearly as if it were yesterday. And I'm honored to be seated next to her, to be here to hear her story, and to let her share with you what she did on that day and afterwards. She is truly a civil rights pioneer, and we're very fortunate to have her with us today. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. First, I would like to thank the people who sponsored me to get here. First, I'd like to, I can't pronounce it, I can't say the dean name. And I want to thank Ruth and my granddaughter and everyone at Boston College who made this event possible. Most of my conversation is going to be unscripted, but I do have a few notes to introduce myself. I would like to discuss with you about my significant contribution that I made to the civil rights movement, the Montgomery Bus boycott story. Some news reporters refer to me as an unsung hero, but I think of myself as a survivor of the movement because so many lives were sacrificed by oppression and sometimes murder. I like to take a line from Langston Hughes' poem, Mother to Son. "Life for me ain't been no crystal stair, because there has been, in spite of all the obstacles in my past, I'm still here to tell my story. I first came out of my shell when my sister Gloria Lasser and attorney Rose Sanders asked me to give a presentation at the 21st Century Youth Group. And then there was an author, Ellen Levine, wrote Freedom's Children. And USA, Richard Williams did an article in November the 28th, 1995. And there also was an article in the Washington Post. And I received an MLK award by Collier Liddell Clark from Albany. And then my whole identity was revealed when Philip Host wrote Claudette Colvin, Twice Towards Justice. I would like to testify how an American Negro child early development and mindset can be affected by growing up under segregation. And one of those children was me, Claudette Colvin. As I go on, I would like to begin by telling you what it was like living under segregation. I would like to go back to March 2nd, 1955. But first, since I'm limited to time, I will only answer 3 questions. The first question is, why didn't I move when the bus driver asked me to get up? And the second question is, was the civil rights movement a failure or a success? And the third question is, how do you feel that an African American has become President of the United States, Barack Obama? So, going back to the first question. On March the 2nd, we got out of school kind of early. And see, that was a special bus that bused me from my neighborhood to the school I attend. Because that was, remember, that was a white school, only 3 blocks, but I wasn't allowed to attend that school. I had to be bused to a Negro school. So we got out of school early, so I didn't wait for the special bus. It was maybe about 13 of us walked to downtown Montgomery. And I boarded the bus in front of Dr. King Church, which was Bainbridge and Dexter, if you're familiar with Montgomery. So we boarded the bus and we sit where we normally sit for that in the seats that were reserved. But at a time, the label said colored to the rear and white to the front. But you see, under Jim Crow law, you could be asked to move. So the bus driver, as the bus proceeded on down Dexter Avenue, more white passengers got on the bus because the bus routes took you through a predominantly white neighborhood. So this white lady was standing near me, and the bus driver asked for the 4 seats. But see, he had to ask for 4 seats because a white person wasn't allowed to sit in the opposite aisle from a white colored person. So 3 of the students got up, but I was sitting near the window, and I remained seated. And they said, well, why did you remain seated? I remained seated because I told them, history had me glued to the seat. And they said, how is that? That's what the news report said. How is that? I said, because February we were discussing history and we was only had 1 week for Negro History Week, but the faculty said we could do it for the whole month because we was deliberately left out of American history. So to discuss our heroes and the contribution that our people that had made to this country, we had to do it a whole month. And we also had chapel meeting every Fridays. And so one of my instructors, who was my literature teacher, Mrs. Geraldine Nesby, she had us to write essays, and we really went into great detail. So she would lecture to us because she had information that we could not find. Because remember, Britannica only had well, at that time we were called Negro, not African American. 2 Negroes, that was Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. And you know, that was a lot of essays about Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. But my essay was about what was happening locally. So that's why one of the heroes was Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman. Now, really, Harriet Tubman really was no joke. She ran something, the Underground Railroad, was called the Underground Railroad. And it's still so, what underground? With no Underground Railroad in Montgomery, Alabama. So then my instructor said the Underground Railroad were the safe houses and the homes that they fled and was protected along the route to freedom, all the way to Canada. So she talked about how I said, well, I want to be Harriet Tubman. So that day I said, you know what it felt like? It felt like I was standing in the midst in the spirit of 2 women. One was Harriet Tubman, pushing me down on one shoulder with her hands, and Sojourner Truth was pushing me down with her hands on the other shoulder. And that's why I was glued to the seat. So they said, and then another thing, we discussed locally, what was happening locally, that you couldn't try on clothes in the department store, you had to know your right sizes, and you couldn't try on shoes, forget it. I recall my mother, when Easter holiday come, you know, everybody wanted to dress up, and to get the black patent leather shoes, she had to go and draw the diagram of our feet on a brown paper bag and take it to the store so she could get the exact size. Couldn't try on shoes in the store. And you couldn't drink out the water fountain. There was a colored water fountain and a white water fountain in the department store. And I said, you know, I will never forget the aroma of the 5 and 10 at that time. You know, there was popcorn popping and peanut roasting and a little candy cone you could see through the showcase. And all over the department store, I just love the 5 and 10. Today, children don't know what the 5 and 10 is. You just had, well, in those days, I knew I was really something else because I was going to shop. I had, in those days, the little kids didn't have wallets like the children today. We had handkerchiefs, and we just tied our little nickels and dimes in the corner of a handkerchief. And I said, oh, no, I'm going to have fun today. And guess what? When I went in the store, I observed white children eating at the lunch counter. And I wanted some of the same sandwich, and they were drinking Coca. Now I found out they were drinking Coca-Cola, and they was eating it was Club double-decker sandwiches. And so I was sneaked over there while my mother wasn't watching. And my mother came over there, she said, Claudette, and just grabbed me by the back of my collar and pulled me back. And you know what, the first vocabulary word I learned as a kid, and I was about 6 or 7, you know what the word was? White folks. My mom said, that is not for you, that is for white folks. And I was a kid, I couldn't believe it. And right then I knew that was unfair. So all this was going through my mind when I was sitting there. See, I wasn't breaking the law. From Bainbridge Street to Court Square. I could think. That's about 4 bus stops. I could think. So we thought everything was over with. Well, we was at Court Square. Nothing has happened. The bus driver didn't get up. He summoned a traffic patrolman. Traffic patrolman came to the back door, and he looked and they saw that I was sitting by myself. And he said, "Yeah, why are you sitting there?" I said, "It's my constitution. I pay my fare to my constitutional right." He said, he yelled to the bus driver, "I have no jurisdiction here." And he got off the bus. So I thought it was over with because, see, Court Square is a little mini depot, and there's other black people standing there, I said maybe about 15 or 20 more black people, maybe about 15 or 20 more white people, because they're where you make your bus connection. And so when the traffic patrolman got off, another pregnant black woman came on the bus, and she sit next to me because she didn't know the altercation was going on, because we wasn't yelling and making a lot of noise. So she sit next to me, and so by that time, two policemen come on the bus, and they yelled to the back of the bus, "You guys not a gentleman enough to get up and give this lady a seat." So one guy got up and gave Mrs. Hamilton, her name was Mrs. Hamilton, gave her a seat. And that still left me sitting there. I was still sitting there. And this white lady was still standing up. So, lo and behold, the bus driver proceeded on to the Bainbridge, in the same direction as the regular bus route to Commerce and Bibb Street. And that's when 2 traffic patrolmen, squad car patrolmen policemen come to the back of the door. And when they got there, they saw me sitting there, and they said, "Gal, why are you sitting there?" And I was even more defiant when they said, "Gal, why are you sitting there?" And I said, "It's my constitutional right. I pay my fare." And they said, "Constitutional right." And then all I know, my books went out of my lap, and I don't know how I got off that bus. I really don't know. All I recall, one grabbed one arm and the other grabbed, because I refused to walk off voluntarily. So one grabbed one arm and one grabbed the other and placed me in the squad car. And then, I don't know what happened. They told me to put my hand through the window, and then they handcuffed me, took me to the police station, booked me, and instead of taking me to a juvenile center, they took me to the adult jail. And I tell everybody, that sound never go. It's like, I cannot explain to you. It's like an old Western movie. You ever seen an old Western movie? And when they lock the guy in the jail cell, you can hear the keys go, click. So I knew I was locked in, and that's when the fear really came over me. Once you're locked in and you can't get out, the fear came over me. And because I'm Baptist, I started praying. I said the 23rd Psalm. I said the Lord's Prayer, and then I started crying. And then we had an assignment about Edgar Allan. We were studying about Edgar Allan Poe, and you know what kind of how eerie Edgar Allan Poe works is. So we had to recite The Raven and some other works of Edgar Allan Poe. Coincidentally, come in because that's the most horrible scene that you could picture: a teenager in a jail cell. So anyway, I stayed there approximately maybe 3 hours or more, and my pastor, Reverend H.H. Johnson, and my mother came to bail me out. And now when we was going back home, we had to go to the path called up the Upper Wetumpka Road, and you was going over the viaduct, and it's not like today modern. It's not modern. It was like back in the 50s, and it was like this honk in the road, in the highway, and you go over this viaduct, and it's a little hump, and you guys can hear the sound of Reverend H.H. Johnson's voice going. He said, "Claudette, I think you done brought the revolution in here." So anyway, I went home, and my dad said, "Oh, Claudette, you done brought a lot of danger on us. We in a lot of danger." And so my dad, you know what my dad did? See, he was a hunter, and the only time black men get shells is during the hunting season. So I don't know, my daddy had some shells up. He loaded his shotgun. And my dad thought he was sure. But see, we lived on this high elevated area called King Hill, and we were sure that there would be some repercussion from the KKK, because the people lived there behind me was known members of the KKK. So, but anyway, everybody on King Hill got the news that what I had did. They stayed awake. No one slept on King Hill that night. But nothing happened. I mean, Mama said, "You know what? God was protecting you." So anyway, this happened to me, and I would say to most people that my significant role was that they used my case, and as they brought Reverend King in, and all the people in the MIA, the Montgomery Improvement Association, after Mrs. Rosa Parks had got arrested 9 months later, and then to find out that Attorney Fred Gray came and said, "Do you know I have filed a case, we're going to file a case," and asked my parents, did he want me to be a plaintiff? Well, my mom said, "They must be desperate, Claudette, because they want you to be a plaintiff." I said, "Yes." I said, "And this mom," and we talked about it, and so I said, "Yes, Mom, you know I'll be willing." And my parents agreed, and so I became a plaintiff for the case. It was me, as I said, and 3 other women. It was another teenager that got arrested in October, but she kept low profile, and Mrs. Susan McDonald and Mrs. Aurelia Browder. They all had incidents, some kind of altercation on the bus system. But it never, so anyway, I was glad to be a plaintiff, and I had to testify. I really had to testify in the state court. And at least all four of us had to testify. And it went to the Supreme Court, and then later got back that we had won the case and that the buses would be desegregated. So I would like to say I did play a significant role in desegregating the bus. But the second question I would like to say is, do you think that young people, I live in the Bronx, and a lot of young people say, "Oh, the civil rights movement was no failure." I said, first you have to understand that was a law in the South. There was segregation, that it meant that no interracial marriages. But it was a double standard, because white men and a black woman would not be punished, persecuted, or prosecuted, and a black man and a white woman, the black man would be lynched, and the white woman run out of town. Well, in other words, I told him, do you understand that would not have been a Barack Obama? And if his parents lived in Montgomery, Alabama, his father would have been dead and his mother been chased out of town. And I said, there were signs, I tell you, signs. I said, Dr. King had to clear the way, because he broke down help by protesting. It was symbolic. And then there was the brilliant attorneys like Attorney Fred, I have to call Attorney Fred Gray, Thurgood Marshall, and Robert Carter. All these men strategized how to break down segregation nonviolently through the court system, to the judicial system. So I said, in the rest that was undone, you have to finish it. You have to pick up the torch and go and carry it to the finish line. So they would say, Then they look at me, I didn't know you could. I said, yes, that was the law. I said, that if you was white, you had your boundaries, and if you were colored, you had your boundaries. But they made it they made it sure that the white people didn't have to go over here on the colored people's side. They provided all the resources for the white people, but colored people had to be on their best behavior when they go on the white side to shop, to shop for, for merchandise or downtown area, whatever. But there were signs. And so I said, Doctor, that's why you had the lunch counter sit-ins. And I said, there was a whole lot. And it broke out. And I said, it branched out from what Dr. King was successful doing. It branched out into other different movements, like the Black Panther movement, the Black Power movement. You know, you had other guys coming in, getting involved in civil rights. And I said, now, like I said, you have to pick up the torch and take it to the finish line, or as far as you can. And the third question, I want to ask how I felt when Barack Obama was president. I was jumping up and shouting like a Baptist just got converted. I was just saying, but I know Barack Obama can rectify, is that correctly said? For what was done to African America for 400 years or more. It's going to take more and more hard work, and everyone have to participate in helping this bill. You know, I speak out for injustice in any form, speak out up. If you're the only one, you just speak out because you know it's the right thing to do. And I said, what we want to do as a race, and as not only as a race, but as Americans, we want this law, we want to progress. We do not want to regress. And that is my story. Thank you.
Before we open it up to questions, we're going to ask Cheryl to tell us a little bit about the event that you're planning coming up very soon related to Selma.
So, how many of you have actually seen the movie Selma? Great, great. If you all would be so kind as to take down www.selma50.com. That's the place to be March 5th through March 9th, and honestly, I invite every last one of you to come. I really do. Selma is where I was born and raised. I left when I was 17, and I'm back home now, and I'm really happy to be back home, and I would really love for every last one of you to come and visit us in Selma. The 50th anniversary is being planned, and we are expecting over 100,000 people to come. President Barack Obama will be there, as will so many other celebrities, Harry Belafonte. Many people that have been in the movement for the past 50 years will be there. And honestly, I would really like to see each one of you to come. So if you would visit www.selma50.com and March 5th through March 9th. Thank you.
Thanks so much. How many of you are considering going to the march? Wonderful. All right, we've got quite a few. That's great. That's great. Okay, we're going to open it up now for a few questions. Yes, Elaine.
Unbelievable. And courage to do what you did. Thank you so much.
Other questions and comments? Okay, in the back.
I was just wondering if you ever met Rosa Parks and what that was like if you did.
Oh, yes, I met Rosa Parks. I spent the night at Rosa Parks' home. She helped E.D. Nixon. My mother was contacting E.D. Nixon. You know, E.D. Nixon was like Al Sharpton in New York. when they had, but he was for getting people for labor. He was getting people like paid vacation and jobs and salary raise and things like that, because there was a discrimination in wages. So you call E.D. Nixon. So he was president of NAACP, and Mrs. Parks was the secretary of the NAACP. And Mrs. Parks knew my parents, my biological parents, when she lived in Pine Level, Alabama. So Mrs. Parks, she first saw me, and she would help me raise money to pay my attorney. I ran for Miss NAACP. And Mrs. Parks was a very soft-spoken woman, and the Rosa that I knew, she would come. I just knew her on the weekend, and she would be sewing. She not only was a seamstress in Montgomery Fair, but she took in sewing at home, because she let me serve as a mannequin for one of the wedding dresses that she was making. And her mother lived with her also. And her mother baked chocolate chips cookies for me to sell in the neighborhood. And her mother would say, Claudette, I'm going to say Rosa's mother would say, Claudette, don't eat them all up, you have to sell some.
Great. Other questions, comments? Yes, in the very back.
Hi, thank you for your story. I just was obviously, like in today's day and age, we have made progress, but at the same time, there's still a lot of work to be done. So what advice would you give to the students and people of our generation in order to make sure that that progress continues?
Well, first thing, we live in a capitalistic country. And although we live in a democratic country, in democracy, a democratic country, but America is not flawless. There's a lot of things that is wrong with America that can be mended, fixed, healed. So when there's injustice, speak up and vote. And the first thing, as a younger person, I told my grandchildren, Jennifer, no, you have to get an education as a minority, because we do not control the money. So you get an education, you can use that as a tool to get what you want. And that's what I think. First, you have to get an education. That is the basic. That is the beginning. And then when you become voting age, vote. Not only, don't wait just to vote for the president, vote locally too. And so you can put people in power that can help better your community and better your quality of life.
Right back here.
I just wanted to echo the last question. I had a question more like on a more micro level in terms of interpersonal relationships between black folks and white folks. What advice you'd have for black people and white people about how to, create a more loving world, since there's still work to be done, even though I know a lot of these macro policies have fallen into place and still need to fall into place. But what your advice is on a more interpersonal level to people.
Well, only thing, emotionally, I can't really go there and tell you what to do. But you have a feeling when there's right and a feeling when there's a wrong done. So the only thing I can say is do what Dr. King said. Do not judge black people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And what you can do, when you see something, don't use the double standard. Don't have one standard for a white person, another for a black person in the law enforcement. And when you see something, regardless, we are multicultural here. So like you have immigrants, you have Latinos, you have, everybody. But in New York, it's everyone. But it's the whole world. So just speak out on any injustice, and don't be afraid to speak out. But some people are afraid to speak out. But you have to be brave enough to speak out. If you see a wrong, something done wrong, don't be afraid to speak out.
Thanks.
Right here? You're the front, this way. Getting their exercise. Okay, go on.
Hi, 56 years ago, there was Dr. Martin Luther King, and he was the great black hope. Here we are, 60 years later, and I feel like there's a lot of people who want change. Now, I just don't know where to go. Who are the people that we should be paying attention to, maybe following, so that we can latch onto that person or people in order to help be allies? Do you have any suggestions, or does the panel have any suggestions?
No,
for
I
us?
do not. This is a major question, and I could not answer that question. The only thing I say, be true to yourself, and you can't go about the leaders. You begin with yourself, how you feel, and how you would like to be treated, and how you would like people to treat your family and the people in your group. If there's, like some people don't like Muslim, like every person who looks like a Muslim is a terrorist. Now that is not true. So, but don't judge a person, like I said, by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And don't depend on any individual to lead you. But if it's something that politically that you want to accomplish, like during the I don't say like when you're voting for the governor. I said don't wait for the governor or the president. Wait for the city. Start at the city council of local people in your community. You have to vote them in because they can improve your community. So that's the only thing that I can say, because in America there's so many different cultures.
Hey, first I just want to thank you so much for your contribution to this country and for being here. And I kind of like what you were saying. You said you were part of an organization. I think it was Power. And I just wanted to see, if you could tell us a little bit more about that and about kind of what lessons you learned that maybe we could carry on in our organizations. Does that make sense? Oh,
No, I didn't understand what you said.
Did you say? You had said you were part of an organization as part of the civil rights movement.
No.
You said there were the black. No. Oh, I misunderstood
wasn't a part
you.
of the Black Panther movement. I was not a Black Panther. I said that was the movement itself branched off into Black Panthers and the Black Power movement.
Oh, okay.
No, I was not a part of that.
I
The only
misunderstood.
organization that I was a part of, and I'm proud of it because it let me get my pension, and that was 1199, the labor union.
I was part of them too, so you can talk about unions if you want. That's great.
Hi, Ms. Colvin. My name is Tiana Deering. I'm one of the faculty here. Thank you for coming and for sharing your story. I try to teach my students that a person's story is an act of philanthropy, sharing who you are and what your story is. So thank you for that. Having listened to it, I am so haunted by the thought of being your parents that first night. I can't imagine as a mother and a father sitting on that empty hill in that house overnight and what that must have been like. And I'm so curious, why do you think nothing happened? And how was it for you and your parents in the community over the first few days and weeks after that moment? It's really a haunting thought, and I'm interested to hear more.
Well, like I said, we had to be on our best behavior because all the time we had to be on our best behavior. behavior. But I asked the dean how you describe this landscape. But this landscape is really, I guess it's called King Hill. Now, the older white community, working class white community, was called Capitol Heights. And this Highland Garden community, low income white, is called Highland Garden. And we in between on this elevated hill, in between. And most of the people that go down the Upper Wetumpka Road do not know that black people lived over there. They didn't know that that was really a community, because you could pass by and didn't realize that it was really a community. So I said, maybe that was our protection, because we was on this little high hill. And that night, I just said, that night was really scary for all of us. And after that, some of the parents told their children not to be around me, because they didn't want nothing to happen. Because I was like, would cause trouble if their children associated with me because of what I had did. Only the children that was in the middle class children that was in Mrs. Park youth organization. That's when she introduced me to the youth organization, and that happened that wasn't the first week. The first week, as you said, was like Edgar Allan Poe's poems, really scary. And my dad, I told you, he just at night, I told you, he sit shotgun. He wasn't going to let them come in there and take him out. And I trusted my dad because he was a good hunter, and I knew he wasn't going to let me take him by the clans without a fight. That night and that week, in other words, we were very careful.
Right here.
Hi, so I actually want to talk about something that happened at BC about 2 months ago. So BC students, 21 students, did a die-in St. Mary's in protest to Eric Gardner and Michael Brown. So the reaction to that was BCPD, told the students to get out and don't do the die-in. And then Boston College also sent out emails to these 21 students saying that there will be disciplinary action. And for me, as a supporter of the Black community at Boston College, that even hurt me in terms of, now students were asking, where's our support? So my question to you is, what would you suggest us to do as students to support the Black community here at BC that feels hurt by the lack of support? And I'm not saying that there isn't faculty and administration that hasn't supported us, and there's been a lot of letters and outlets that has been supporting, but I still feel a sense of division at Boston College between the student body.
Well, I cannot answer that question, but I do know that anytime minorities, when there's a problem, and the faculty going to take the side of the dominant, group. So, like if being a minority, you will have to suffer the consequences of your action. That's all to it. You will just have to suffer the consequences of your action. If you think you're doing something right, like what I did, I thought I was doing. I didn't think about. Well, anyway, when I was in that cell, like I said, I was going to go to reformatory school. And I knew I would have to pick a lot of cotton that summer. But that's the only thing that happened. Because the only thing I could say to try to get more students to understand the double standards that is taking place. It really is a double standard in the law enforcement. Like I said, there's one rule for one group and another rule for another group, for minorities. And there's no justification for it. Everybody should be treated equally.
Hi, I want to thank you also for coming. Can you talk a little bit about the role of women in the civil rights movement, and do you think that's been given its proper credit in the history of the civil rights movement?
No, I don't think women got enough recognition, because you hear mostly about the people that did a lot of the organizing. You don't hear about the women who was behind the men who was in the group that was help organize. You only hear about the men that was out front, in front of the camera. I don't know what was going on. Like, I met one of the ladies that was in SNCC, and she said she did a lot of work, and a lot of people didn't know about her. And that was Diane Nash. A lot of people don't know about her. And there's so many women that did great things in the civil rights movement to push it forward and to keep it going. And they only hear, like someone asked, what about Rosa Parks being they made a statue. I said, Rosa Parks, I said, she's an iconic woman, but she's only symbolic. I said, to me, it could have been Emmett Till's mother, who suffered a lot. And it could have been Fannie Lou Hamer, who suffered more than Rosa Parks. And so she made a significant contribution to the civil rights movement and the Mississippi delegation. But you don't hear too much about Fannie Lou Hamer. And a lot of the other women that was in the movement, they didn't get the proper recognition. There's a lot of women that didn't get recognition, did significant things.
Okay.
Hi, I'm just curious what went into the decision to have Rosa Parks be the face of the sort of the Montgomery Bus, all of that movement, and not you?
Well, I do not know. I can't answer that because it was decided by the Montgomery Improvement Association. I didn't have anything to do with it, and my parents. What I tell you would be only speculation.
Hi, I'm wondering if you would speak a little more about kind of the reactions of people on the bus, both black and white, that day, and also maybe about that first traffic patrol who got on and wound up saying it's not his jurisdiction, and kind of what your sense of what his thoughts were.
I don't know. I know. Well, the traffic patrol, the traffic patrol. Well, when he looked at it, saw it, he recognized I wasn't sitting in the white section. A lot of people thought I was sitting in the white section. I wasn't sitting in the white section. I was sitting in seats assigned for colored people. But what happened, I said, this is my opinion, since we were students, the bus driver said, and the other white students there, they would say, why don't you make those colored? You know, they didn't call us colored. You know what they call us, the N-word. Why don't you make them get up and give that lady a seat? And since the three of the ladies got up, and I left me sitting there when the traffic patrolman come on there, I imagine that's why he said he had no jurisdiction there. That's the only reason I could say it, because I wasn't breaking the law.
What about the black and white other folks on the bus as well? What about their responses?
They was shouting, they was going back and forth, but not really loud. The only thing I remember, this was from a lady that was lived in my community. A little white girl, she wasn't a little white girl, she was a teenager too. She said, well, you got to move because that is the law, that is the law. It said, you got to move. And the girl in the back, she said, that is not the law. She ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die.
This is a great event. I'm so glad you could come. This is actually as much maybe a question for Cheryl as well as you, but you know, you are a family that has really lived the civil rights movement. You know, it's right there. It's not just in a book, you know, that maybe other families that haven't had those experiences. How have you lived that with the generations that have followed? On day in, week out, you know, you have this history to pass along. Is it something where from day one you're always telling, you know, Jennifer or others about it? Or do you wait for the situation and then say, hey, you know what, I was there, I can tell you something about that? How have you lived that on a day in, week out basis?
Well, I tell them the same thing I tell all of my, I have 5 grandchildren, and I have one son that's in Atlanta. And I always told them, we live in a capitalistic society run by, well, white people, white men. White men run this country. And we are a minority. And I say, get your education and use it. And I save your little pennies and you can use them for wisely. And I said, when you go out there in the corporate world, I tell them, I don't know whether Jennifer can remember this. I said, you got to have 2 heads. Now, RSC Life, he said, Grandma, what you mean by 2 heads? I said, you got to have a head for the corporate world that you're dealing with. And I said, I'm going to tell you that. I said, white folks. I said, you got to have a head when you're dealing with these white folks, and then you got to have a head to know where you come from and know your limitations. That's what I said. That's how I tell the young generation. And the rest of the little kids, I see them run up and down the store. Now they're with all the food. I say, and I would be clapping. Oh, yeah. They can touch things that I couldn't. Oh, I couldn't touch nothing in the department store when I was growing up. So I see all these little black kids. They don't even know what it was about. You know, they don't know. They don't realize what it was about. I'm talking about down south. I'm not talking about in New York City. I'm talking about when I was visiting down south. They be running up and down the store, touching everything. You couldn't get on that in the drugstore right outside the store. What they call that little? I think they call it a hobby horse. That little thing, that little horse that rock, and you put a nickel in and it go rock, rock, rock. And the little black kids couldn't sit on that hobby horse. Now you know that's over with. I seen the change. I live. I see, and I tell Jennifer, I hug her, and I say, I have seen some of the fruits of my labor. Not only for my children, but for all American black. I said African American children. But years ago, we were saying colored and Negro. So I've seen that change. But they don't realize that is a big change. They don't realize it. Even though we have the double standard and we still have the struggle, they don't realize how bad things were in those days.
I think that's it for questions. What a wonderful way to end this. Please give her another hand. We will have an opportunity for all of you who are available to continue this discussion right next door, because there's going to be a group meeting of the Graduate Students of Color Association. And we're very happy that both Cheryl and Claudette will be there, along with Jennifer, to talk further. So this will occur. And also, because you haven't had your dessert, there's dessert over there, so you'll get to eat something as well. I just also want to mention, as many of you were asking questions about, you know, what's next and what can we do, one thing that I'll mention to you is that as part of the profession of social work, one thing that we're in the process of developing, and it's a program that's referred to as the Grand Challenges, and one of the grand challenges of social work these days, one that's being written right now, is called Ending Racial Injustice. And this will be an opportunity for all of us as social workers to begin to seriously look at these issues, both historically and from a contemporary perspective, identify those racial injustices, and to identify very creative, effective means of making a difference, because right now we still have major disparate outcomes. So there will be more that you'll be hearing about that. I'll also mention, just in terms of upcoming events, that you have heard us mention the name of Elaine Pinderhughes before, sitting right up here in front. We're very happy to say that we will be honoring her at the annual Pinderhughes Diversity Lecture, which will be held on April 15th. We hope all of you can attend. This year, the speaker is Salome Rahim, who is the dean at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. So we're really excited, and she will continue in her discussion the theme of racial and social justice. So please plan to join us for that. Again, 8:30 to 11 on April 15th, which will be in the Murray Room at the Yawkey Center. Any other questions, comments?
No, just to say, hopefully, as I said at the beginning, it was as memorable for you all as it was for me. When you walk away, there were a couple of questions about how did this family really, is it their DNA? Is it their culture? What is with this family? So last night when I said to Jennifer, who is going to be a global practice student, so where do you want to go? She decided she wanted to go to the most dangerous part, one of the most dangerous part of the world. I said, absolutely no way. And then I asked the mother, how would you feel about this? Would you be not, I don't want to scare you. She said, I'm not scared at all anymore. I'm over this with Jennifer. She does all her things by herself. So it is something in the DNA. Join me again for a round of applause for our